got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been winning all the war. I've been winning all the war. And I've been shutting down the stars.
Welcome to Put That Coffee Down, the freight sales show for closers. My name is Kevin Hill, your host each week, Tuesdays. We're usually live Tuesdays, 12 p.m. Eastern Time here on FreightWaves TV. Today is no different as well. So we're going to talk about sales today with Michael Sternberg, Director of Sales at 3PL Systems. We're going to talk about kind of on the FreightTech side, more than on the freight brokerage side, more on selling to 3PLs, selling to carriers rather than selling to shippers. But welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you guys having me on.
You bet. So let's talk about the buyer's journey. We all know about TMS systems. We all know about anything that really has to do with enterprise-wide sales. It's a longer sales process. It really is a journey. You have many different features and plugins and all kinds of customization that you can do. Let's start off and talk about the buyer's journey.
Sure. So, like you said, with selling TMS, it's a bit more of a what I'll call an intricate product. There are so many different ways you could go with it. But when it comes to selling TMS, you have to understand, I think, where your buyer is at in their journey. Depending on what data source you look at, something like 2 to 4% of anybody is ready to buy, frankly, anything, not just TMS, at any given moment. So what we focus on a lot over here is upon initial outreach and getting in touch with these clients or potential prospects, figuring out where they are in their process and then guiding them along whatever different channel it may be to get them to that promised land, which is obviously ultimately making them a customer over here.
So what is one of the biggest buying decisions that you usually see? You get a 3PL to a certain point, and is it usually starting out with their first TMS or their first maybe large ticket TMS, or is it more they've outgrown their current system, or how, whether that's off the shelf or maybe the proprietary?
Sure. So we see all of those. Typically, we're going to be maybe a little bit too expensive for somebody who's just starting out. However, we're not the most expensive platform out there. And so a lot of what we see is people that, one, understand they need good software to start the operation, and it may be a little expensive, but they can grow into it. Or two, they've gone with a smaller, cheaper option and they've actually outgrown it. Or three, which is all the way up or at the higher end, which is maybe I'm paying too much. Maybe what I have is too complicated and I need something that's a little easier to train my people on and something that's going to be friendlier on my wallet. So we kind of serve a nice mid-market, and we allow people to either grow into us or maybe realize they don't need as advanced or as expensive as a software as they have today.
So let's get back to the buyer's journey a little bit and talk about that as well. And let's just lay it out and define. We talked about it a little bit right there at the top, but let's get into a full definition of the buyer's journey, how any of us, whether we're selling to 3PLs or selling to shippers, RFPs, RFQs, or somewhat of an enterprise system. You get into dedicated management and you're definitely into an enterprise type of solution. So the buyer's journey, let's define that right now.
Yeah, so if I could give like a one sentence on what I think a buyer's journey is, it would be simple. It's how does a buyer want to buy from you or anybody else for that matter, right? And the reason I focus so much on the buyer's journey is typically salespeople are trained on the sales process, which is focused on what I want and what I need. And I need to put you through these steps and check off these boxes and put you into you're qualified, you're this, you're that, which all that's important, but you forget to think about what your buyer wants and your buyer needs. So that's really what the buyer's journey is how do I optimize my process and what we do as salespeople to help guide you along a way that removes a lot of friction for the buying process.
So you're exactly right on that. you have the buyer's process. The buyer's journey is much different than the seller's journey. So we have open account, qualified lead, we have demo done, we have follow-up, we have maybe second demo or committee meeting for the decision makers. And we kind of, because that's our everyday language, we typically think in that language, and we undervalue the buyer's journey. With the buyer, the person who is window shopping, who's outside the bubble, who is just peering into the system or to the contract or whatever you may be, the inner workings of your organization, and what they're perceiving or what they're getting out of that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the problem is that we force buyers into what we want and what our process and what our timeline is. And a lot of times that comes from the top, right? We have numbers we need to hit, especially with all this institutional money that's being thrown at FreightTech, as everybody knows. VCs have numbers they want to hit, and a lot of that filters down to the sales reps. But the reality is, like I said earlier, was not everyone's ready to buy now. So figuring out what journey I want to take those people on is, I think, what's critical. So there's a few different ways people start their journey with anybody. It's an inbound lead. They find you on the website. They search you on Google. There's outbound. And then there's word of mouth. Those are the three large journeys that people will start their process on. Obviously, there's idiosyncrasies within that. But realizing someone who comes inbound, they have a different journey. Someone who I reach out to and is ready to buy, which again is like 3%, versus someone who has a contract that expires in a year, or maybe needs to grow a little bit, or I need to educate them more on the value. And how do I keep that pipeline full with everybody in those different stages? Because a lot of times sales reps forget to follow up. And this isn't old information. Everyone knows the money in sales is in follow-up. But optimizing that follow-up to who you're talking to and what their preferred journey is, again, is really the focus.
I think a lot of times we think we have a prospect through the door and they're that 2 or 3, they're always that 2 or 3%. And if I just do this, they're going to buy tomorrow, right? They're going to buy at the end of the month so I can hit my quota, and that's my goal, is to make that happen. Where, they might be under contract for another year. But you're not going to get that deal this year. But if you don't start working it with the expectation of that hitting a year from now, you're never going to hit it anyway. I mean, you're never going to close that deal. It's a long sales cycle. You have to take in consideration, the processes and contracts and whatever other internal buyer issues or processes, whatever you want to call it, right? Challenges there is, because it's a challenge, and it's something that you might not be able to overcome that obstacle. You have to work with it.
Yeah.
You have to work with it and accept the fact that maybe it's a 12-month buying cycle with this one customer, and that's your 12-month, and then you go focus on deals that you can close right now.
It absolutely, and I think that's the key, Kevin, is making sure that every channel is as full as all the other channels, right? If I just rely on outbound, or if I just rely on word of mouth and referrals, or if I just rely on inbound, I'm screwed. And that goes for anybody that's in a longer sales cycle. If I look at the deals that we closed in 2021, you have a slew of deals that maybe took 3 years. You have some that took a month. You have some that took 6 months. And, it takes time to build a mature pipeline like that and be able to be patient and understand that I don't have to call you, get you on a demo, or get you on a discovery, get you on a demo, send a proposal, and slam this deal in 30 days. A lot of times that's just not realistic. But what a lot of people do is they forget, okay, well, I need to go on to the next one. I'm happy to take 3 years to sign an account, because when they sign, eventually they're going to be a customer forever. And I have 3 years to build my case and to build my value and to allow you to know when the time's right, you're going to remember, damn, that Mike guy, he reached out to me once a quarter. I heard his voice. He was in my ear. Now we're ready. And then when they're ready, it comes down to a few things. Are you an expert in your space? Does your product actually solve a problem that they have? And can you articulate your value in a real way that's easy for them to understand?
Well, let's take the second one of those, because it was a question that I was thinking about asking anyway. And that second point revolves around, do you have what they want to buy? And are you showing them what they want to buy instead of showing them what you think is cool or what you think they want to buy, or the entire kitchen cabinet? Every plate, every glass, getting into the weeds when you should not be getting into the weeds. I think that's one of the challenges in enterprise sales or really complicated sales like that. There's only, in any TMS system, a lot of enterprise, the usage, a customer might only use 20% of the overall product, right?
It's pretty close, actually. I'd say 25.
So 25%. Okay, so 25%. So if you're showing them and hyping up the other 75% that they're hardly ever going to use or they're not really interested in, that buying process for that customer becomes very confusing. It becomes much harder for them to make a decision. They're evaluating well above what they're capable of, or they need to even be debating. They should be talking about that 25% that they're going to be using on a daily basis, because that's what's going to sell anything, rather than the 75% that's just nice to have.
You're spot on, and really what that comes down to is two things, right? It's effective research on the accounts and the prospects that you're going after, and then when you talk to them, effective discovery, because the reality is these people will tell you what they need. If you know how to ask the calibrated questions, if you know how to treat them like a person and not like a prospect that needs to fit into your process, prospects tell you everything if you can get them talking, right? And so, again, going back to the theme of the buyer's journey is, I'll give you an example with us. Talk to a prospect who's focused just on truckload, and they split their team into the Chicago model with customer sales and carrier sales. And then I talked to a second prospect who really runs their operation around LTL, and they need all those APIs, right? I'm going to drop those two prospects into completely different funnels and educate them in a way that allows them to see the value there. It's funny, you mentioned the whole customers probably only use 20, 25% of the TMS. And, we tell people that a lot. Look, if you take our whole client base, 100% of the tool is being used. But on an individual basis, you're lucky to get 20, 25%. And that's just the nature of building a TMS and having a large amount of clients and being around for a long time. You get a mature product that just does a lot.
You do. I think that goes across the board for a lot of FreightTech, right? Is the use is only 20, 25. You're trying to identify one problem. And that is part of the issue too. You're talking just a second ago, and I couldn't help it, but thinking, what are your pain points? And thinking, I've asked that question many times. I don't like the question. I don't like the way it's phrased. Because as soon as someone says that, they're like, okay, well, I'm being sold right now. So it's good, and this is a sidebar. I might do an entire episode about that. About how to ask that question without using that phrasing, which is cliche now.
Yeah, I think it's almost lazy, right? And
lazy,
I think a lot of that, a lot of it comes down to training. I think that's not uncommon to see people that haven't been in sales for a while use that kind of question. There's so many ways to ask anything. And words, as being in sales my whole career, words are really interesting to me. The way I say things may not be received the same way that I think they should be. But let's just take your example. What are your pain points? You could go in a humorous direction with it and say, hey, when you're working in your system every day, or take it for the guys that sell freight, when you're moving loads and you're dealing with your other brokers you're dealing with, what makes you bang your head against your computer? What makes you want to throw your keyboard out the window, right? That's asking the same question, but in a way that's more human and less salesy. And we all know this as well. People hate to be sold to, but people love to buy, especially when you're solving a problem for them, right? So there's so many different ways to go at it. Again, the humorous one, which is more my personality. Or, you could just go real, if you have someone who's real stiff and bottled up, it's, as simple as, hey, during your day, if there was one thing you could change that would just give you more peace of mind, what would it be? And that's a little more direct. And yes, it's asking the same thing, but it's not that lazy cliche. So what are your main pain points? You sound like a robot who just got done with sales training 101, right?
You do, but sometimes you get lazy, or I guess it is a little bit of laziness, and you just ask it. What I always kind of like is, especially on the tech side, is, if you could design your perfect system, what would it be?
Love that.
Let's dream something up. Let's write something down. Let's diagram the workflows. What do you think would be a better workflow? And they'll tell you what it is, and then they'll tell you, without any prompting really, why they can't do it today. And that's all, all the information you need. That is their pain points.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I use it a lot myself, actually. Again, going back to people will tell you what they need if you just ask the right questions. And the fun part about what we do, and anybody else that's in FreightTech could say the same thing, is most of the good ideas come from your clients, right? If you can open that channel, they will share with you what they want. And here's the reality. Look, I understand freight brokerages because that's who I sell to, but I've never brokered freight in my life. And that's okay, because I'm able to understand enough and be an expert to get people maybe sometimes to think I've worked in a brokerage. But I also know that they know better than we do. Yes, we know the product. Yes, we know the product from the back end. I don't know how they're sitting and using with it every day unless I sit with them or hear from them. And the amount of development that we have in the platform that probably came from clients, and I bet this is the same for most freight tech providers, is probably close to 50% of the ideas.
Yeah, it is. You come up with a framework, you get a MVP, minimum viable product, out on the market, and then you put it in your customer's hands or your beta tester's hands, however you want to describe those, and they immediately break every single thing that you spent all this time designing, right? They immediately just start breaking it and shattering it. But that's where you rebuild it based on their usage, their opinions, their feedback into something that is much more than MVP, right? It's much more than a minimum viable product. It becomes a mature product that then gets sold.
You couldn't be more right, Kevin. I think more than what clients will tell you what they need, they'll tell you what doesn't work, right? and there's benefit in that, right?
There is.
And we went through that as a company about 5 years ago now. We rewrote the platform from the ground up. So 3PL Systems has been around since 2005, but the system we sell today has no code from the old system. Actually, when I started with the company, we were going through that process, and the amount of iteration and client involvement and breaking and building and learning together has allowed us to get to where we're at today. And I think tying it all back to what we're talking about is people will buy how they buy. They're going to go through their process. And I really don't think you create urgency as a salesperson. I think you just uncover it and align with it, whether it's from a new prospect or a current customer. My job is not to force you into my structure. My job is not to tell you what I'm going to build and you're going to use. My job as a provider of freight tech, or any other tech for that matter, is to collaborate with you and give you what you need.
I think you brought up something that was really fantastic there, and I think not only for tech sales, but also for any sell, really goes into 3PL, shipper sell, especially kind of an environment where in right now, or getting close to being in, is you cannot create urgency as a salesperson. You can only uncover it. So that's part of discovery. That's part of qualifying. That is part of every single conversation. You have to uncover and find those buttons to push to, not to create urgency, but to activate it, I suppose, right? Because you're not really creating it. Because if you're trying to create it, you're creating it on my timeline, right? The whole thing, oh, I'll give you a deal if we sign, well, today or tomorrow, because it's the end of the month right now, right? We're taping this on 4/28. I need this. I need this. Well, that doesn't create urgency, right? You have urgency, but you're not transferring that urgency over. And if you do, it's going to be a very weak type of way. You have to uncover the natural urgency. Those pain points, right? What was the most painful? What needs to be done today? What can we roll out just temporarily to that you need right now? You have to uncover those types of needs to be able to act. I'll call it activating urgency. It's not creating urgency.
No, I think that's
you're activating the urgency. You're bringing it to life.
Sure. No, and it is funny because I cut my teeth in sales. I was going door to door residentially, getting children sponsored in third world countries. And then I transitioned to a business to business role, selling copiers, business to business, knocking doors. And everything that I was trained on told me create urgency, create urgency, create urgency. You're in charge, you're in charge, you're in charge, which is true. I don't want to come across as saying you don't need to drive the business because it's your responsibility as a salesperson to be following up and doing all these things. But you use the example of a discount at the end of the month. And anybody who's been in a buying role for a long time knows you're going to give me that discount next month anyways, because you just showed me your cards, right? So if I go to someone today, to your point, I'll give you 10% off if you sign by tomorrow. It's the end of the month. I really need to get this deal in. And you say no. And then you come back to me next week and you say, hey, I'm ready to sign, but I want that 10%. I could try to say no, but you already know I can give you that price and I'm going to, right? And so the salespeople and the orgs are doing themselves a disservice. I was reading a stat the other day, which was really interesting. It's something like 80% of the time a refund is brought, or not a refund, sorry, a discount is brought up. It's the salesperson who brings it up first. And we have these habits that I think this will create urgency. I think this will get it across the line. And it's just not true. If 10% makes or breaks the deal, you haven't created enough value to begin with, and there's not enough urgency for you to activate that exists in the organization before you were there, right?
Yeah, and you bring up something else, and we're running a little bit low on time, so we're not going to get into it that much, is how much value you have to build. In FreightTech sales, you have to build exponential value for every dollar you take in. And that's something that you should be focused on. It's not something easy to do, but when you get your mind around it and you realize how important that is to really create so much value that it's hard to say no, and that's something you can do in tech, then your life becomes a whole lot easier.
I couldn't agree more. You get to a point where the dollars and cents don't matter, right? You tell someone whatever it is within reason, obviously. But it's not once you start talking about the money, I really feel like you start losing deals, honestly, when it comes to tech. I mean, the money, I'm not one of those guys that says, don't talk about money until you've built value. I'll tell people early on what the price is because I want to make sure we're not wasting each other's time. And I'll give you a range. But by the time you've done what you're supposed to do as a salesperson, if you've done a good job, the number is the number. It doesn't matter.
I like going in early in the process, and whether it's giving a range or the exact, so I can build value above that, right? It sets an expectation, right? If you go through and you're showing value, and then all of a sudden you throw out a number at the end, excuse me, at the end, it seems like it's much harder for the buyer's perception to say, oh yeah, that's all this value, because you're going to get kind of sticker shock no matter what. You should expect the sticker shock, start with it, and then you set the expectation, and you know exactly their expectations, and that gives you a benchmark to add value off of.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, B2B sales, even at an enterprise level, is getting more like B2C sales, right? So there's so much information available. And what I mean by that is if I'm a buyer, I go to a store, I see the prices on the shelves. It's getting to be similar for buying any sort of software, even enterprise software, right? So if I'm on a discovery call, I'm going to tell you what the price is within a range. To your point, now my job is to justify that price instead of the other way around, which is how sales used to be, which is don't talk price, don't talk price, don't talk price until you've been able to build that value. People could tell me I'm crazy, but I disagree.
I disagree too. I think so. I think that's another episode in of itself. We're running out of time, Mike, though. Mike Sternberg from 3PL Systems, Director of Sales over there. Thank you so much for joining us. Really quickly on LinkedIn, how does our audience reach out and contact you?
Yeah, so you can just look me up. It's my full name, Michael Sternberg at 3PL Systems. Happy to connect with any of you guys. We have a really active company profile as well, which we do a lot of ongoing education, keeping those buyers in that journey and letting them know who we are and what we do. So definitely give me a follow on LinkedIn, give the company page a follow on LinkedIn. And Kevin, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. This was fun.
You bet. Thank you very much, Mike. And for our audience out there, that wraps it up for this edition of Put That Coffee Down. Catch us here live on FreightWaves TV every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.
I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been winning all the war. I've been shutting down the stars.